2020. It is about 7:21. We are in the Select Board meeting room in Ashland Town Hall, and we are being recorded and broadcast by WACA Cable Access, and we thank them for that. On our agenda tonight, the main item that we're going to be talking about is 81 West Union Street Phase 2. They have a significantly revised plan for the site plan review that's in progress, and it will now be a special permit as well. So we'll get into that in a minute. We have on the agenda a public hearing for a scenic road application on 433 Chestnut Street. That is being continued till our first meeting in February, which is February 13th. So we won't be talking about that tonight. We'll be talking about a grant proposal for the Upper Charles Trail that the planning board may send a letter of support for. We apparently have to re-sign a ever so slightly changed a form of the approval not required plan for the public safety building because land court found some issue with it that has to be corrected. But other than that, just some administrative things, and so we should move on to 81 West Union Street. And I will read the public hearing notice and open the public hearing on the special permit, which will run alongside at the same time as the continued site plan review. The Ashland Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, January 23rd, 2020 at 7:15 p.m. in the Board of Selectmen Meeting Room, 2nd floor, Ashland Town Hall, 101 Main Street, Ashland, Mass. To hear the petition of 81 West Union Street LLC, care of Peter B. Barberi, Esquire, 70 Sec Drive, Holliston, Mass, requesting a 2 special permits and site plan review per Chapter 40A, Section 6 of the Massachusetts Zoning Act, and Chapter 282, Sections 3.1, Use Regulations, Section 5.8, Site Alteration, Section 9.3, Special Permits, and Section 9.4, Site Plan Review of the Ashland bylaws. The applicant is proposing the development of 3 new buildings totaling 28,913 square feet and parking. All 3 buildings are proposed to be mixed use to include both residential and commercial uses. Building 1 is proposed to have non-medical office and retail services on the 1st floor, 4 residential units on the 2nd floor, and 4 residential units on the 3rd floor. Building 2 is proposed to be a mixed-use building with 2 residential units and 3 general services units. Building 3 is proposed to be a mixed-use building with 2 residential units and 7 general services units. The property in question is located at 81 West Union Street, Assessor's Map 19, Lot 067. The property is located in the Highway Commerce Zoning District. All plans and documents are available at Town Hall and the Planning Office during regular Town Hall hours. And the Planning Board welcomes any public comment that can be submitted at the Planning Office, by email, or in person at public hearings. With that said, the public hearing is now open, and I would welcome the applicant to present the updated plan and explain what they would like to do.
Okay. Good evening. For the record, my name is Peter Barberi, Fletcher Tilton on behalf of the applicant. Also this evening here is William Rodenheiser and Jonathan Ward on behalf of the applicant, and Bart Lipinski, who's our civil engineer, to answer questions in the nature of the plan. It was probably back in October that we were last here talking about the details of the project. And after that last kind of public hearing on the discussion, there was determination, well, we did a site walk and looked at the issues and the nature of what the heights of the buildings would be that were proposed at that stage of the game, which were 44 feet in height. From that, in ongoing, that some questions came about in the nature of a covenant, so the hearing has been continued while the parties kind of investigate that whole issue. It came up, I think we've had 3 meetings with staff and council over it, talking about the details of it and how we could revise the project to address issues associated with that covenant. It's our opinion that that covenant in and of itself is not determining in the nature of the special permits and zoning aspects of it, but we understand it's part of the board's understanding as to the site. So as I said, we met 3 times with staff and council and revised the plan to incorporate what were or are the conditions of that covenant. And as we go through this project, I'll kind of describe those as well. The net result being we are agreeable to incorporating conditions in the special permit and site plan decision, which would require the compliance of the items that have been addressed as part of the covenant aspects, okay? So with that as the background, as I said, we've gone forward and modified the plan to address that. The biggest modification, as you read, is the nature of treating the property in each of the buildings they're on, the 3 of them being mixed-use buildings with residential tenants in each building. Overall, the plan in the nature of the engineering did not change. The kind of, I guess, what I would call the footprint of the development and the nature of the paved areas in basically the buildings themselves, nothing changed from that perspective. We submitted the revised application for the site plan and the special permit application, which has been reviewed by your staff and your consultant. I think in the nature of the drainage aspects, there's a couple little things that we need to identify, some spot elevations, and provide some information on cover over the underground recharge systems that we went through extensively with the drainage report with them and as part of the previous discussions. And I think their conclusion, as reported in the report to you folks, is that the drainage system is basically unchanged and acceptable. Again, it would be our intent to take the comments that the consultant made, as well as some of the comments that we had gotten in the nature of staff, apparently a staff meeting, and revise the plans, plus presumably anything we consider tonight, and get those back to the town probably the beginning of next week as a final set of plans to address the remaining details from the consultant in the town. At that point in time, and I'll go through it, it's our opinion that we comply with the requirements of the bylaw, allowing for the issue of the permits for the proposed project. So identifying where we are, and again, we've, based upon the meetings with the town, spent thousands of dollars revising this to address all those aspects in discussions that we had had. So just again, to familiarize yourself with the site, East Union Street along the bottom, the first building closest to Route 9 is what we call Building 1. That is a 3-story building with a basement, again identified. We're identifying the first floor. Each of the floors is roughly 5,500 square feet. We're identifying the use of that building as kind of office or retail, because we don't have any tenants for any of the buildings. But we have determined that, and we've based the parking on what we anticipate to be the uses of the buildings. The second and third floors will have 4 units each, and then the basement would be for storage of the tenants. So one of the comments that your consultant made was understanding what the basement was, and that's not a separate storage facility. It would be an independent thing that is part of the operations of the lot of the building. So we're not projecting any additional employees associated with that, because it's basically dry storage for tenants. That's Building 1. In the nature of the construction of Building 1, this is the plan. That building, in the nature of the night, has not changed, because that has always been a 3-story building. If you recall, that's basically 44 feet to the peak of the roof. The design of this, we had gone through changes with the board before we started continuing, but this is the clapboards and the mullions and the different treatment throughout. So we do not have any changes in the nature of that building because we had gone through the architecture of that building previously. From the viewpoint of Building 2, the discussions we had through staff was, again, incorporating the determination of the bylaw definition of mixed use, which uses the term units, which we were told from the town's position would be a minimum of 2 units. We have incorporated 2 units into the Building 2. In discussions, we thought that those were best located to the west side of the building, kind of behind Building 1. So you can see, if you look at the plan, this area here with kind of lines through it. We have also provided garage space in the building for the 2 units. We have also added, as you can see from the architectural plans, dormers to give a different appearance in a more residential field as well, both front and back. The footprint of that building hasn't changed. All the buildings are located in full compliance with the setback requirements of the bylaw. This building height has been lowered. If you recall, the height of the original proposal was 44 feet. This is now down to, I believe, 29 feet. So a drop of almost a third of the height of the building. We have incorporated replacing the metal that was there in the metal roof with asphalt shingles as well as vinyl, again, to create that different, more of a residential feel than the commercial feel, which is, again, discussions we have been having. Moving on to Building 3, the changes to Building 3, again, incorporating 2 units in the building. If you recall, one of the aspects we had originally was treating the whole site as kind of a contractor's yard site. We had outside storage and all the rest of those items. Those have all been removed with a plan. We did enlarge Building 3 by adding an additional bay in the back, which we have identified that use as a retail use and calculated parking based upon that as a retail space. Otherwise, Building 3, again, physically has not changed. Again, the only change being the installation of the 2 units, which are basically mezzanine units on both ends of the buildings. We will be providing floor plans. That was one of the comments that your consultant made, so as part of the package we'll resubmit those to show exactly the layout of all the residential units within each of the buildings. The elevation on this one dropped down to 38 feet from the 44. And if you recall, this building is already basically sunken, I think, anywhere from 4 to 6 feet from the surrounding properties. So that visibility is not an issue. Again, we've replaced the metal roof with asphalt, and the siding is all vinyl, keeping in place with what is happening. From the issue of the permits associated, as you mentioned, special permit required, or criteria for the special permit deals with the issue of traffic. We have provided the traffic report, which I think your consultant has signed off on. The traffic giving these uses are significantly less than the use of the property, which would be allowed for larger, more commercial traffic generating individual uses. The residential also adds a little bit of reduction in the sense that you don't have traffic typically during the course of the day as compared to commercial uses. Community needs, again, at this stage of the game, the project is allowing uses which are allowed under the bylaw. The design and layout of the buildings and design of the site is in compliance with the conditions of your bylaw, so we feel it meets the community needs. Aspects of landscaping and engineering, utilities, this use of the site is significantly less than normal utility demands and demands we had looked at originally when we were talking about development of this site. At that point in time, we went through the process with the town before it imposed a moratorium and had set aside, I think it was little 17,500 in sewer gallonage in anticipation water generation. This project now is probably in the range of 5,000. So a significant reduction in the nature of utility demands and services, and all those services are in the street and are all adequate to serve this proposed development. As I went through the architectural changes, we think those bring the property more into compliance from what it was and the nature of the character of the neighborhood, the vinyl siding, the asphalt roofs, everything else. And again, location of the building fully comply with the requirements of the bylaw. Fiscal impact, there certainly will be increased taxes associated with the project when it's complete, as well as increased employment, all required water, sewer fees, and everything else. So there will be no increased cost to the town in the nature of this development. And therefore, I think we meet fiscal standards relative to the special permit. So I think those are the special permit requirements set forth in the bylaw. Kind of those conditions apply to any special permit applicable to the property. So I believe we satisfy those requirements. As I said before, I don't think the covenant is applicable in nature of determination by the board as far as the determination of compliance with the project with the zoning bylaw. But as I said, we are willing to incorporate into conditions of the decision items that were sought to be addressed by the nature of the covenant. The first item being mitigation. There are requirements in the covenant of $500 per unit, residential unit, and $500 per 1,000 square feet of space. And for this phase, and I think, if I remember correctly, those are due at the time of issuance of the occupancy permits for whatever individual space, and we are agreeable to that as far as these three buildings. Landscaping requirements of the covenant basically follow the requirements of your bylaw, which is basically a 6-foot perimeter with landscaping in there. The landscaping that we have talked about even before we continued the hearings is basically a continuation of the landscaping that had been agreed upon to create this buffer edge to these residential. There's a continuation of a fence as well as landscaping all the way around the perimeter of the site, consistent with what was approved as part of phase 1. And of course, that will be maintained as part of the condominium requirements as far as common area. The height of the building is less than 3 stories. The only building 3 stories again is the first one. So height requirements we met in the nature of what the covenant was seeking to accomplish. I think generally that's it in the nature of both the site's compliance. Again, the reports we've received from your consultant as well as staff, we got to make some adjustments and show a few more things in the plan, but there's no identification of any aspect of the project not in compliance with the conditions or terms and conditions of the bylaw. And as I said, we're willing to incorporate various conditions within the approval to address what was sought to be addressed in the nature of the covenant, again, although the covenant isn't rationale for determination. So that's the overview. We can certainly answer any specific questions that you have. The other aspect of it, as I said, the drainage didn't change. We have received an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission before this last submittal in December. But as I said, the limits of the pavement have not changed. In the viewpoint of environmental impact, we satisfy the Conservation Commission's no disturbance zone requirement. And we have answered all their questions in the nature of the use of the site, the operations and the maintenance plan during construction as well as post-construction. And I believe a copy of that order of conditions was submitted as part of the package.
All right.
Just real quick question on the parking. So the building 2 has 2 garages for the apartments. The rest of them are just outside parking?
The only interior parking are the 4 parking spaces for the two apartments. The rest of the parking spaces,
Are they
even
assigned
the parking
spaces?
for the residential here.
They
are all
assign spaces
accurate
for
to
the
site.
apartments, assigned spaces so that the commercial, not fighting with commercial people?
Well, again, from the viewpoint of the residences in this, we will probably designate spaces
Yeah,
across that way, so they have a minimum of one per unit, the rest of it would be in common.
that's all figured out by how many you need for the resident, how many you need for the commercial, and add it
Yeah.
all up. Okay.
So, I mean, for the 8 units within this building, we would designate, 4 here, 8 here, and then they are free range of the rest of it. For the 2 units over there, we probably designate, there's 4 units here, so we probably designate 1 over here for this unit, 1 over there for that. And the other unit that would be required, or they may need, would be in common with everybody else. Most likely, they're gonna need them at night, and the whole lot's gonna be empty because the commercial spaces will be empty.
Well, does anyone else want to jump in, or should I give my reaction?
Start with you.
Okay.
Might have some more.
I have a lot of reactions to this. Where to begin? First of all, the pavement. I think, as we said before, this feels, just visually looking at it, like this is a very asphalt-intensive development. Anything you can do to reduce the total paved area would be a significant improvement. I know you did do some of that already.
Yep.
But any more that you can do would make this look a lot nicer.
Yep.
As well as help with the general stormwater issues that we have in town.
We really have kind of 2 areas. This area here is required, and as part of the plans that you have a fire truck turnaround radius, so that's, needs to be there for that purpose. What we're gonna show on the revised plan that the fire department asked is that he wants to make sure nobody parks in this area. I don't know why they would, but our concept to do that would be to do some striping in there and put no parking so that nobody can do that. So there's nothing we can do in the nature of that. This area here, one of the things we gotta look at too, that your consultant wanted, is in the nature of a required loading dock. So that we're anticipating a loading dock area back here, and be able to service that loading dock, we're gonna need turnaround movement for that truck. So I understand your point, but from a functional point of view, what's happening on the site, we'll take a look at it, but I can't guarantee you
Yeah,
we can do further reductions.
I understand it's a awkwardly shaped site, and with some industrial type uses that require trucks, there's a lot of pavement involved. Doesn't mean I have to like it. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't look to find a creative solution if we can find one.
Yep.
Building 2, one of my previous big concerns is it was really too tall, and you've done a lot to pull that building height down. Thank you.
Yeah, that went down, I think 15 feet.
Building 3, you pulled down a little bit, I believe, but not that
That
much.
was a little over 6 feet.
Yeah, I was less, when we did the site walk, building 3, just visually where it fit in, didn't feel as concerning as building 2, but it still seemed tall. So that is good to improve that. Building 1 also felt tall, and you haven't done anything on that. And just visually looking at the rendering
Yep.
that you have, if you pulled the roof line down 10 feet and had these as dormer windows in the roof line on the top floor, you might be able to get 5 or 10 feet lowered on the building height.
I'm not an architect.
I'm not an architect either. I'm just saying, visually looking at it,
Yep.
we've seen other buildings in town with apartments where the total building height is not that much taller than the ceiling height on the top floor. And this is a lot higher than what it appears. And you're not, I'm not
I'll
asking.
take a look at that, but I mean, we need for the third floor of the residence, you need that, whatever it is, 8 feet? What's the ceiling height for the unit?
No, I'm just looking the height between the bottom of the roof line, which
14 feet.
looks like it's along, which is probably about the
8
roof
foot.
height, the ceiling height, because it's above the windows,
Yeah,
to the top, the whole top,
yep.
you got about 14 feet. And I understand you need some space for, air conditioning
Because
units
that's, yeah,
and
that's,
stuff.
you wanna hide all the
And
mechanicals.
whether you're hiding that,
Absolutely.
how you hide that can differ from building to building.
All right, well, we'll.
But, you can look at, the plans for 128 Main or 12 Pond Street, for example. The overall building height is not that much higher than what the ceiling height is for
what
the top
what
floor.
the ceiling height on the floor is.
Yeah.
All right,
So
we'll take a
you
look.
could probably pull that down a bit, and that would make it much better.
Yeah.
More conceptual, the doing mixed use by mixing residential with the contractor bays is, at least for Ashland, a fairly novel concept. I don't initially have a very positive reaction to that, but if it turns out that there are contractors who want to both rent the bays and live there, I could see that actually being a very
Unique and
useful
marketable
thing. I mean,
enterprise. That's what
I
we're
know.
hoping.
I have a friend who grew up in an illegal apartment above an auto
Yes.
mechanic shop.
Yeah, we
and,
don't want to have to deal with that.
And it's nice seeing this done, above board
Yep.
as an option. I mixed feelings of, would somebody actually want to live there in that industrial type space, with surrounded by asphalt? That I can.
Well, that's why one of the,
But-
as I said, we talked to staff, and we talked about that building in particular, and clearly felt that putting these 2 units closer than this more commercial basis in those other 8 units made the most sense locational-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one, you gotta put them in there, and just, we figured the back corner would be the most secluded areas for that.
Having the building 1 being mixed use with commercial on the ground floor and residential above is very much the image of mixed use that I think the residents had when
And
they
that,
voted
and that's
for
the building you're gonna
the
see.
zoning. That is. The real issue I have with that is the building height.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, we'll take a look at
When
that.
we were out there on the.
What's the height of the storage building? You know that? The
The,
storage building they just built?
the next door,
Anyone remember what
gotta
the height
be
is on
3
that?
stories, those heights are probably at least 10-foot ceiling, so
Oh.
probably between 35 and 40 feet, I
Yeah.
would think.
Pe-
I'll
people-
find out.
I was just
Yeah.
wondering for a comparison.
Yeah, but I know people have been saying that building feels too big for the site. There's a lot of
Yeah.
negative community reaction about that building.
Yeah,
So.
and as soon as the spring comes along, we'll get all the landscaping in and
And that'll
dust that
help.
out, because I agree with
Yeah.
you, it's an eyesore at this stage of the game.
So on building 3, so the residential units are on the back side of unit 3, on both ends of it. So I'm looking at this drawing right here.
This would be the backside.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so like where that long staircase is coming out, that's a
Yep.
staircase
That
accessing one of the
That's
residential
the
units, yeah.
staircase that'll be there.
And then the other residential's on the other far end. The second unit in 3 is at the other end of the building.
Yep.
It'd be nice to have a little floor plan.
Staircase there.
Yeah, they're
That's
gonna
that
have that.
staircase.
Yeah, okay. So the residential units on either side. Got it. And then the portion of the building that was an extension from the previous plans on building 3 that has a pretty, not a flat roof, but a slighter pitched roof. There's 4 garage doors there. So this you've talked about being a loading zone and a commercial use.
A commercial retail use, we're figuring that it might be somebody who has picnic tables inside, those type of things, so that's where we want the garage doors. but that'll be a retail operation, and that's how we satisfied that, we use the parking calculation for retail. That's roughly 2,000 square feet, so
Yep.
we used it. But again, one of the comments from your consultant was that he wants a loading area because this is a commercial building and you're required, so.
Well, with 4 garage
this
doors,
is
you've
kind of
got a
the
loading
only
area.
space
Yeah.
we can create.
Yeah, okay. So that's intended to be separate from the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bays in building 3. That's a
Right.
separate commercial.
Yeah, yeah,
rentable
he just
space.
wants
Yeah.
us to show a loading area on the plan. It doesn't, under your bylaw, have to be attached to the building, you just need a space somewhere in the site for it.
Got it. Okay.
Now, one thing I don't see is any internal architecture drawings
He
on
said
these
they're gonna
buildings.
get that.
The floor plans, that's what I
Yeah.
mentioned, we're gonna
So-
provide those early next week.
So looking particularly at this building 3,
Yeah.
seeing the back unit with this really long walkway and stairs to get out, is that the only way into that unit, or is there an internal?
Into the 2 units in the back, yeah. Right,
That's
that's
the
an
way in.
elevated unit.
Right.
One-bedroom apartment on the second floor.
Because I also remember, and I can see from the windows that it looks like you're also planning a mezzanine kind of work area into the contractor bays.
Yes,
Something.
again, to create some architectural things along the back of the building
Yeah,
as well.
something you should have is like one of, in hotel rooms where they have the double back-to-back doors, so if you're renting both rooms, you can go between
You can
them.
go-
You could have the same thing, so that if somebody is also renting that bay, then
Well,
they-
within the condominium documents, there are allowance to attached units as long as you're not making a structural change, which wouldn't be. So
Yeah.
if they did buy those, they could make that connection.
But it should be designed with that in thought. And I also could see somebody, if they're renting one of those units with, presumably, they might have room to park their personal car in there too, so they might actually have indoor parking, even though it's not officially designed for that.
Yep.
But yeah, the access to that unit looks questionable to me, especially, in snowy weather, having all those steps and as the only access. I'm not sure that's good.
Correct me if I'm wrong, for building code purposes, you need to have 2 egresses and ingresses, correct?
There's an exception in the IBC, when you have a residential unit and it's under a certain occupancy, you only have to have 1.
Okay.
So,
Can
I
you
mean, we
please
anticipate
submit-
you'd have a decision that we gotta comply with whatever code requires, so, but it's our opinion that that complies, and if it doesn't, we'd have to.
Can you please
come back.
submit documentation to the office regarding that regulation, please? Thank you. Excuse me.
No, that's good. That's kind of where I was going.
Yep.
The access for that unit feels problematic to me, and that's something you should look at.
And again, to get back to your comment, we're somewhat anticipating, although we can't guarantee it, that that's gonna be part of the unit below, in which case they'll also have access within the building.
Yes, I understand that. Yeah.
I would echo Preston's earlier comments. I think bringing down the height of building 2 by 14 feet is a substantial improvement to that one. The way the grading works, going back to that site visit, that was one of the things that I was struggling with the most about the initial plan. Building 3, you brought it down as well, which I do think is good. The grade does hide that a little bit more so. So I would just echo that. I think it's good. And I do think, Preston, you're onto something with building 1 in terms of that 14 feet of to ridge line on that, and if there's something that
Yeah,
you
it's
could do
the-
there just to, so.
Yeah, I think a lot of the buildings we've been seeing, they have sort of the mansard roof that, and then it's flat. So it pulls the total building height down. I'm not an architect.
I'll actually get them some concepts. I did a multifamily in Millbury, where that was the exact issue. People were concerned about the height, so they did mansard roofs.
Yeah, so
I'll give them those. They
it's
can
worth
take a
looking
look
into
at.
that.
No, it's not a flat roof.
Yeah, it's a
Doesn't have to
flat,
be.
it's pretty
We'll,
much a
we'll,
flat
we'll see
roof.
we'll take a look at it.
Yeah. You know, I know there are a lot of different ways of doing roofs, and I know flat roofs have issues with snow and water, but they're also, you know, they seem to know how to build them now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, again, we'll provide, we're gonna submit the early part of the week, take the consultant's review item by item, show where we changed it, show how we addressed it, same thing with the staff comments.
Other comments from the board, or should I ask for the public?
At this point, yeah.
Okay.
without seeing the floor
This is
plan.
a public hearing. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment? If so, please come to the podium. And state your name for the record.
Good evening, Emery Bond, 59 West Union Street. Just had a question on Building 3 on where the mechanical units would be placed.
What was the question?
Where are the mechanical units going to be placed?
And for,
Within-
which
within
kind
the-
of mechanical units are you
The
talking?
HVAC units,
Okay,
heating, mechanical, cooling, things of that nature.
That would be within the roof structure.
within the roof structure, okay.
So physically located inside the roof
Yeah.
in the attic
the
space?
attic.
Okay, yeah.
Tom Ferris, 73 West Union Street. I agree with the board about lowering the roof on number 1 building, because putting that up is going to put our house like in a canyon. So I think it's very good that they've lowered that, but lowering the one on building number 1 would even be a great improvement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Emery Bond, 59 West Union Street again. Do you have an idea of the duration of this project? How long is it going to take to build? When would it break ground?
Depends on the timing of these permits, really.
We're hoping in the nature of the start of construction this spring. What
We
do you
imagine-
anticipate the timing?
Depends again on tenants, but we had anticipated starting, last fall, so, assuming this gets through, we'll be starting, I would say late spring.
Okay, so if you start in late spring, would you be building it all together in one phase, or are you doing the building separately? What would your,
We probably will
intention?
build the building, 2 first, closest to, Mr. Ferris's, to start creating some screening there. And that will allow us to clear and do some of the, processing that will be required, in the back area, so further away from the rest of the houses. But,
What do you mean processing, sorry?
well, you know, we have, there's
Dig
a
up
lot
the
of rock,
stone.
like,
Clean the
Mhm.
material you use on the site.
He's on the
Yeah.
street.
could you go to the microphone? There might be people at home who would like to hear, and without a microphone, they can't.
Thank you.
So, some of the materials, just like the last time they came off the site, there's obviously a ton of rock, and that has to be downsized and then, and processed. And the goal would be to try to do that in the back of the site. We do have some currently behind Mr. Ferris's house, that will need to be processed, but we'd like to, do that first, and work in that front area to get that stuff under control, and then start on that building first.
And so if you do start on this site in April, when would you foresee finishing the whole site, ideally?
I'd say probably 18 to 24 months.
Okay.
That's for the buildings. Construction of the buildings. That includes the construction of the buildings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So just for reference, phase 1 has been, we're about to click the 2-year mark on phase 1, which means this whole area and some of the abutters will be affected for 4 years for a project.
Can you respond to that? So phase 1, timing, nothing to do with me. Sold the property, somebody else owns it. Their timing has affected me just as much, if not more, than anyone else, because I'm kind of under a microscope now for what went on there that has nothing to do with me. I'm just working for someone there. They're doing the best they can to, wrap things up under a temporary CO now. Peter's been quite active coming out to the site. And most of the landscaping is actually done. We're going through the process of getting final bond amounts from Peter, which the owner is taking care of. But I really had no control over that.
But you're gonna have control over this part, right?
Yes.
Or are you gonna sell it
Yeah.
too? No, so this will be your,
It was a little unclear on the plans, but what is the setback from, I'm the building 3 lot line. What's the setback from the property line to the back of the building?
11 feet,
11 feet.
or
So
11 to 12 feet.
could we get some clarification on the screening, the fence and the boulder wall, and how that walkway is gonna fit in 10 feet?
It's fairly easy. You keep that grade as part of the construction of the building, you level it off, there's a fence that goes in once it's level, and the landscaping goes in at the same time. 10 feet off the property line.
Excuse me, we'll just request a detailed cut. I think that would be suffice to, when you resubmit, if we could point out a detail, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was, want to go over that? Yeah, it was, because you guys actually asked it the last time.
Yep.
And we provided a detailed mark. Can run through that.
So on sheet number 4, we have a section that doesn't actually go through the backside of building 3. It's further past it, so we could actually see where the proposed parking is, or paved area, the wall, landscaping, and then a fence behind it. And again, that's through this section. In this area, there actually is no wall behind the building. It's almost existing grade going to the back of that building. So we would actually have a pretty flat level 11-foot area that we're gonna put a walkway in, plantings, and then a fence on the property line. So that's to a scale. It kinda gives you a pretty good description of how much lower this first floor of this building is compared to the lot next door.
Brandon Bond, 59 West Union Street, abutter. We would just request a detailed drawing of that screening, as Peter recommended.
That's it.
Right there, it's on the plans.
It has a cut section beyond our property as abutters. And we're assuming we're gonna get the same screening that the Ferris property has, fence, arborvitae's. It's not shown on the plan.
It's on the plans, on the landscaping sheet.
Can you show me, please?
On the landscape plan, these are the plants that are planted currently, and then we would continue that all the way around the perimeter. Privacy fence, same arborvitae's that would go all the way along.
Where's the fence in the arborvitae detailed?
The fence line is along the property line, and there's the plantings, and the plants are called out on the landscape line.
Do you know the material of construction of the fence? Is it gonna match what's the existing?
Yes.
And same number of arborvitae's and spacing? And again, I just request a detailed, because there's a lot of stuff going on in this drawing. If you could just do like a micro detail of the screening for the neighbors, that'd be appreciated. The drawings say the top of slab of the building 3 is at 252 feet above sea level, and then the boulder wall details top of wall is 258. So that doesn't sound too flat. That sounds like there's a 6-foot change of grade, so that's why we need a detail. And then secondly to that is if there is a significant change of grade, we share a tree along the property line that's a large caliper tree, that if it's dug on the other side of the property line, those roots are impacted and that tree dies or falls over. So I'm concerned that's why we need that detail.
Okay, through the planning board, town planner, I would request the applicant submit a cut detail sheet of the boulder wall behind building 3, in addition to a cut sheet of the arborvitae's and the fence that would be all along that property line, just to have some some further clarification. Then obviously clarification on the elevation as cited by the abutter.
Maybe include the existing tree location so that, like you said, if you chop it right up to the stump, that might not be good, so just so everybody.
Per se included all the trees on their property, we can deal with what's on our property.
No,
We can
but
find out
if you
where
can
the
just find out where that tree is, because that seems to be an issue, to make sure that, huh? Okay.
You mentioned condo documents at some point. So are these being sold as condominium units, or are they going to be owned and rented?
I think as I explained before, each of the buildings, simply put, will be its own condominium. So if you had a unit in building 2, you're only gonna be responsible for the common elements associated with building 2. Each of those condominiums will kind of form a master condominium, which will be responsible for all the common areas, which is basically the parking and maintenance and all the rest of that stuff. So as a building owner, you only deal within your building. As a unit owner within the complex, you're dealing with the parking and the landscape maintenance and everything else that's on the site.
So, all of the residential units and all of the commercial bays and commercial unit are condominiums.
They're for sale.
They're for sale.
Yeah,
And subject to-
they're all part of a condominium. Yeah.
Are there any affordable housing units?
That's an issue that hadn't come up, so we can talk about that. Get back to you, there's a total of 12 units, so.
Yeah. We do not have inclusionary zoning bylaw, obviously. However, we can talk about that. Yet, obviously, the planning office is working on one that can be discussed. I think if the board wanted 10%, affordable, that could be, a condition that could be leveraged within any decision.
No, I don't know what you've done.
If they're for sale, yeah, you can do affordable as a condo
Yeah.
for sale, yeah.
And I don't know what market research you've done on the interest that people have in residential with contractor bays. Some of this, it looks like it wouldn't be too hard to convert and actually add another unit or two in some of these buildings, if there's the market for it.
There may be a period of time where the building is built and we have some vacant tenancies, that may be the case.
So, if it turns out that this is something people generally want, you might want to look into that.
It's a new use to me in my career, obviously, so, it is definitely something that is, it's a proposal, and it's in front of the board, and that's where it stands today.
And it's mixed use where the living and the business are in doubt being the same people is one of the ideal uses of mixed use. Is it, you don't have to worry about commuting. So when it comes to traffic, that's
Certainly will provide that benefit. In
Yeah.
Limited
And like you
basis.
said, there's a lot of bootleg people doing that already.
Yeah.
living at their
Pretty big
businesses
facility
and
in
where they're.
Acton, near the train station. It does just this.
Does contractor
Matter of
bays
fact.
with residents?
As a matter of fact, they have some industrial users there.
Um,
Well, I guess it'd have to be people that understand that, 6 o'clock when the landscaper's getting loading his truck in the morning, it's gonna be every weekday.
Brandon Bond, 59 West Union Street, abutter. Mr. Barbieri, you just talked about having this be a cut job, meaning they're going to excavate material down from the existing site. But Mr. Rodenheiser said that there's a stockpile of boulders that are going to need to be processed. If it's a cut job and you need to pull that material out, why does it need to be processed on site? The neighbors have been subjected to dust, which was not remediated at all during the construction phase. And now we're hearing that they're going to be more material processing, basically effectively making the site a temporary gravel pit. And I know the neighbors are not going to be excited about that, to go through another 1 or 2 years of crushing and hammering. Second question, the plan still shows ledge, a ledge outcropping, which was brought up in the conservation. Is that still there? And if so, what's going to be done there for either hammering, blasting, or crushing?
So as far as the balance of the cut to fill on the site, it's somewhat irrelevant because there's going to be rock removed from the site that you can't fit into a truck. So it has to be broken down and mixed with other materials that can then be reapplied to the site. So we're going to be stripping all the topsoil and the other deleterious materials, and then that export will still have us in a situation where we're going to need fills to build the roads. The area that is now very low adjacent to the wetland also has to have quite a bit of fill put in it. So that material will need to be processed on site. And last year, as far as processing and crushing, the entire crushing portion was done in 4.5 weeks because we rented a machine, and that's how long we had the crusher there for. So we don't anticipate being there for a year or two processing material. As far as the ledge outcrop goes, that was definitely brought up in conservation. It's labeled on the plan as ledge. We went out there and did some, I believe conservation asked us to do some additional testing to prove the viability of the soils. We did another 4 test holes, provided that to the conservation, and based on that information, they did give us an approval. What's labeled as ledge, a lot of this stuff is just really, I mean, you guys all know Ashland, right? So it's a lot of really big rock, much of which can be downsized with hydraulic hammers, as we did in phase 1. I mean, I don't anticipate the blast. I didn't have to blast on the entire other side. That doesn't mean that I won't hit something, but I mean, there's probably 50 or 60 test holes on the site, going back from 2004, 5, 6, and I did most of them, and not once did I ever hit ledge. And there's 3 different civil engineers that monitored these 3 different rounds of test holes, which is, I think, at least 50 or 60 over the past 15 years, and we did not hit refusal, so I mean.
Is this on the same topic?
Yes.
Okay.
Brandon Bond, 59 West Union Street. So it does sound like you are going to be processing material. The last time that you did the processing in 4 weeks, again, there was a dust issue. There was no watering, no dust control in place. So what are the controls that will be put in place during the crushing, hammering activity that will prevent the dust from happening, and during the whole construction phase, not so much in regard to crushing, but the dust during the summer months when the site dries out to powder dry conditions?
We will need to extensively cover that in our decision. and make sure that we have a system in place to monitor that, since there's been a history of a problem here.
What about enforceability of that? Who would be in charge of enforcing dust control? Because that was something that was an issue during phase one.
Just speaking from that, the zoning enforcement officer obviously is the enforcement officer from the town. However, I've tried to make myself present on the site, and have been in communication with the abutters and also Mr. Rodenheiser. So it would be a team effort from the staff here in Town Hall.
The zoning enforcement officer being the building inspector in Ashland.
Correct.
Yeah, I was going to ask, there is no official zoning enforcement
Well,
officer in the town of Ashland.
So
There is, it's just he also has
You
the
wear
title
many hats.
building inspector.
correct.
So on the topic of the water and the dust, this was again in the permitting process from last fall, discussed extensively, and we assume that the board is going to take the same position, as Peter has made very clear over the past few months, at least in the fall, and during that process, that we're going to be expected to manage that situation. There's water, there's sewer, all the utilities are now on the site off of the street. So we have water on the site now sufficient in a 6-inch water main to provide irrigation for the material.
Excuse me. Tom Ferris, 73 West Union Street. I'm the one that's been complaining about the dust because it's caused me some medical problems, and I've been on medication because for 2 summers, my wife and I have not been able to use our deck or our yard because the dust, like, you know, the dust bowl sometimes. And as far as the stone processing, we came back 2 years ago from our vacation in Maine. I had to call the building inspector, and Bill sent somebody over. We had pieces of stone all over the backyard, on our deck, inches from the slider. And in the fall, I had somebody inspect our roof because the insurance company was concerned. There was no damage, but they found pieces of stone up on my roof from the crushing. So I think there has to be something, and the person he sent over, nice young lady, she said she didn't understand why there wasn't at least netting put up. But we had stone, and I said, all over our backyard. It even went over the roof to the front yard. So I'd like to see if he's gonna process stone, have it far away. Better just haul it off site to a proper facility. Thank you.
Emery Bond, 59 West Union Street. Another issue during phase one was the working hours. The contractors worked often on weekends, even on Sundays, and after the 7 o'clock construction hour in the town of Ashland. How is that going to be mitigated for phase two, and who's going to enforce that?
I do want to make the comment because, you know, in terms of the dust, this was something that, you know, there were repeated attempts to deal with that, and the person who has developed that storage space, you know, was not, in my opinion, right, was not responsive to those issues, and it's something that we talked a lot about over the course of time. I talked to many people over the course of phase one about the noise and about working after hours. There was numerous phone calls, and in every instance, I did reach out to our town planner, and our town planner did try to talk to the developer of Site One, and you know, I just want you and other, you know, neighbors to understand that this was something that, you know, at least in phase one, I did try to pay attention to, and we, you know, there were efforts by town officials and people on this board to address that. I'm personally, as a member of the planning board, frustrated with the success that all of those phone calls and efforts yielded. I just want you to know that. So it doesn't
Maybe-
change your experience or
Maybe
any of
we
that,
need to
but-
make a little harsher penalty, like if there's.
Yeah, I think there could be a way to write penalty,
Gotta be, 'cause that's
a
what
penalty
people-
in, or,
I mean, it's
you
a
know.
different,
I mean-
evidently it's gonna be different
Yeah, I mean,
company doing it. But that doesn't guarantee anything's gonna go smooth. I mean, on the last phase, there was concrete trucks blocking the road and lining up, and there was all kinds of violations of it, but maybe we need to get a little more specific on what the remedies are.
All right, I can, for
If
the next
it's-
meeting, I can look into those remedies to see, you know, what can and what can't we do within.
And we don't wanna penalize them by stopping construction, cause that just stretches it out for the neighbors, but there's gotta be
Well-
something in there, an incentive to not break the rules.
Sometimes you need to stop construction, cause
Yeah.
that's really the
But
big hammer that
You
we
don't want
have.
that the only option, because
Right.
then that drags it out too. I mean, it's, you know,
It's a
And-
catch-22.
that,
And-
at some point, you need to do that, you need to do it, but there needs to be some kind of a motivation.
And we
to
do have
not-
the advantage now that they're not, you know, one of the big problems, the phase one was parking on the school access road. And that's, you know, just
Now they got
logistically
room
isn't
in there.
isn't a factor
The,
here.
the thing is the owner for site one is the offender who deserves to be punished. And Mr. Rodenheiser is the applicant for site two, and he's gonna pay, he's gonna pay the penalty for applicant one here in terms of the rules. And I'm not suggesting we don't put rules and enforcement pieces in here, but it's just,
But he's not gonna break the
late.
rules.
Too little, too late.
But he's not gonna break the rules.
I understand that.
We're not in Colorado.
I understand that. I'm just
But
stating.
we have to
I'm
make
just
sure, cause
stating
that,
something.
almost every project, that ends up being a problem of just slowly but surely skirting it here and a little bit here and a little bit there, and so we need to be really kinda strict on all those rules.
And my,
Sure, you know.
Emery Bond, 59 West Union Street, butter. Last question for me for the evening is, we talked a lot about the covenant. The applicant permitted phase one, and the covenant was never brought to light. And now here we are in phase two, and we're talking about the covenant. Why is the covenant coming to light now?
The problem with the covenant is that when the covenant was agreed to, the owner did not register the covenant with the deed, and the town did not follow up to make sure that happened. So that was part of the agreement in getting the zoning change in 2006, I believe.
2006, yep.
And because it was not attached to the deed, it didn't automatically come up to our attention when phase one was being done, and nobody in the room brought it up because nobody remembered it, or possibly somebody remembered it and decided to just be quiet about it. I don't know. But in any case, if we had been aware on the board of the covenant, phase one would have been different. But at this point, our understanding is that's water under the bridge, and, you know, we can't knock it down or do anything else to really fix that at this point. Particularly because and at this point, the covenant, because it wasn't filed with the deed, didn't carry over when they sold that to the new owner. So that we can't seek remedy from the new owner. It would be conceivable for the town to sue the former property owner for damages under this. I don't know if there's any actual talk of that. It's all hypothetical, so I don't want to have a discussion on that. So I'm just saying, hypothetically, I'm not a lawyer, I haven't even talked to counsel whether that's possible or practical, but that would be the only way that something could be done about what happened on phase one. My understanding is at this time, the town's approach is to treat it as water under the bridge, and there's nothing that can be done. And, you know, we can have an academic discussion about what we could and couldn't do, but really,
Too
you know,
late.
short of spending an awful lot of money going to court for probably what is less money than we'd spend going to court, you know, there's not much we can do.
That's, it's a little disappointed to hear, but a simple question is, why wasn't it filed? That's what I was getting at.
Just speaking to that, I think, you know, we can't turn, you know, I wasn't here in 2006.
It's more directing towards the applicant. The applicant is the owner who was supposed to file that documentation, so And
Uh,
then they were here to present it, and they didn't present it.
And also is up to the town. The town should have followed up when we were doing the zoning in 2006 to make sure that it was filed. And so we messed up on the planning board. I was actually on the planning board at that time, so I personally feel bad about this because I can go back and look in some of my files and I can find an old copy of the covenant. And I should have gone and I should have found it when this came up with phase one. So I feel bad that I didn't find this because I should have, and I had it there and I didn't.
It's just a little ironic, because previously this evening, the applicant's counsel said that the building was an eyesore. So it's a little ironic, that's all.
Yeah,
It's water in the bridge, we're not gonna change the past, it's just,
Yeah.
let's not
Yeah.
shape the future.
Going forward, we're gonna make sure it's all on the up and up.
and, so,
I was gonna bring it, I forgot. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. Is Brandon Bond, 59 West Union Street, is the board aware of any other modifications or any other documentation related to this site that might cause the same issues as said restrictive covenant? Has a documentation search been conducted?
Just to speak to that, no, we are not aware.
Okay.
Hi, Mary O'Brien, resident of Ashland. I had been here at some of the meetings before, and I have some of the same concerns. First of all, the three things I was looking at in this properties are, number one, the safety issues, which I mentioned before. I really think the flow coming in and out onto 135 is going to be problematic. Two, I was concerned about the appearance. Aesthetically pleasing to, and again, that other brick building with the orange doors is not, but anyway, I thought maybe this next section could be. Three, also the uses of the buildings which are going to be put up. I was concerned about what was going to go in there. What would it be? A lot of trucks. We go looking at just a bunch of trucks, etc. Okay, so I just think the whole thing is very dense, and you've got so much going on. You've got retail, you've got residential, you've got commercial, you've got whatever some of these things are, general services. It just seems like a hodgepodge of things. And I agree with Preston that this is not appealing. It doesn't appeal to me either. It just seems like a hodgepodge of things. I don't know anything else like it in the town, but maybe there is, and I just don't know it. The other thing I wanted to mention was about, my question is, you're gonna have 12 apartments throughout the 3 buildings, and are they gonna be condos, or are they just apartments people rent?
They're part of it, they will be,
Condos.
every unit will be a condominium unit within the building.
Right, so in other words, the building itself is a condo?
Yeah.
Okay, and the apartments in the building, each one is a condo?
Is one of the units within the condo.
Yeah, so, just like, if I wanna rent that apartment, one of the units, do I have to pay $250,000 to buy the condo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or somebody will.
And then they'll
to
rent it
you,
out,
but
yeah.
that, You know?
Is that, do you understand that?
I think I do, yes.
Yeah.
So
And then-
there's
You
a
can't
condo
rent it
within.
They have to
And-
be part of the condo.
You can't rent it for $1,200
And
a month
also-
and pay a 12-month lease and rent it as an apartment and
Like
then
you
leave.
regularly
You
would.
have to
not from them.
buy it for,
No.
Yeah.
But the commercial
Ah.
part of it, someone
So-
can buy that and rent it
so-
outright, or someone can buy it and use it.
So this is like, say,
So
Village of the
it's
Americas
hard.
or the other condo developments that we have. It's just the buildings look different. But still, the units are sold, and some of the people who buy them choose to act as landlords and rent them out, but it's an individual thing. Unless somebody decides to buy the whole thing and
Okay, so
operate as
so a
apartment
person who goes in there for wanting an apartment, they would be purchasing?
Yeah.
Yes,
That,
it would be for
okay.
purchase, not for rent. That is their
Right,
business
okay,
model.
all right, but they could then turn around and rent it to
Yes.
somebody else?
Yes, there'd be
according to the
nothing
rules.
stopping somebody from renting
Okay, all right.
property they own.
Number 3, another concern I have is parking spaces. Now you've got, people renting, and, excuse me, may I come back? Are there going to be one-bedroom, two-bedroom, three-bedroom apartments?
10 of them are 2 bedrooms and 2 of them are 1 bedrooms.
Okay, all right, so, again, I'm just thinking, I don't know what the parking rules are in Ashland, I'm not familiar with them.
Parking requirement is 2 spaces per unit.
Two spaces per unit, and
we
that's,
provide that.
and that's a residential unit?
Yes.
Not the,
Different-
other
different
units?
parking calculations for the other uses, we provided that calculation with the town's consultant.
The zoning is very clear for each type of use, how you calculate the required parking.
Okay.
So it's a fairly standard way. They go through and they say, okay, well, we have this kind of use, therefore, like a commercial use, it's based on the square footage. You need 1 parking space for something like every 250 square feet or
Okay.
something like that. For,
And the thing with the residential mix is,
Yeah.
again, they're gonna need the spaces at night when the commercial space is vacant.
yeah, so, and in the, the contractor bays have very little parking requirement, I assume, but, anyway, they show in the plans that they meet the parking requirements, or they can't build it.
Okay, so right now, at the plan that we're looking at now, it has correct parking, given what's going in
The
there,
requirement is
according to the
86,
rules
that
of,
we have
according to the
88.
rules of the town.
That is my understanding. Before we go forward with this,
We'll make
we
sure.
send off the plans to an independent engineer that
Oh,
the
okay.
town hires at their expense, who reviews, things, including, does it comply with the parking regulations? So they do all
Okay.
the technical,
Check everything.
double checking to make sure that they're not skipping out on any of the bylaw requirements.
Right.
And that's one of the things they
Oh,
check.
good, okay, I'm glad to know that.
So
Um,
we as, volunteers on the,
I
on the
understand, thank you
board,
for your
don't
time.
have to know
Everything.
exactly what the requirements are on parking, because we have a professional that checks it for us.
Good, okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I thought you had to carry all that knowledge with you yourselves.
Well, we do accumulate it, but,
Okay, also, may I just ask, again, I don't know, what is mixed use?
mixed
It keeps
use,
coming up.
is a term that means, a combination of residential and, non-residential in the same, place.
Building? Okay,
So like that, so when you have the most common mixed use is apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floor with commercial on the ground floor, like
like downtown?
like 21 Main.
Right.
That's
Traditional
mixed use.
downtown
Okay,
neighborhood.
all right.
Yeah.
Then what are general services building? What's that? Because one of these is number 3, building 3 is general services.
Yeah,
is that-
I think that's their term for what I'm referring to as contractor bays. Is that?
Contractor
Yeah.
bays,
So
workshops,
they
there's a
have-
definition within the bylaw.
Yeah, so they may be using more technical terms, but basically, it's a section of the building with a big industrial-sized garage door that you can pull like an electrician's truck in. And so an electrician, a plumber, some other contractor of that nature would rent one of these. They can have all of their tools and equipment and park
Okay.
their truck in there.
Okay.
It's
But no exterior operations.
Oh, that's what I was
Anything
just
would be
gonna
done.
Yeah,
ask.
it's-
So in other words, nothing outside, the trucks would always be inside? Okay.
There's
Yeah.
no.
And no manufacturing,
Right.
okay. And is there any, I think that building had, no, maybe it didn't. The building that has the general services, I think it's building 3. I can't remember. Does that have some apartments in it?
Yes.
It's going to, is there any safety issue there, like
There will
between
be-
the ceiling of there and the apartments above?
That's a good point. There are building code requirements for that sort of thing, that our building inspector and, will have to review to make sure they're
Okay.
meeting.
And all
I
the
know, for
buildings-
example, in our house, we have a living room above our garage.
Yeah,
And when you do that, because there's the possibility of,
Yep.
a
carbon
car fire,
monoxide, yep,
the construction between the ceiling of the garage and the floor of that room, they have to do special stuff to make it much harder for a fire to burn through.
right.
And they will probably have very similar requirements in the construction of this.
Okay, I hope they will.
And our
Well,
building,
exactly, there's
yeah.
fire code requirements
Yeah.
for extended fire separation between commercial
Yeah.
and residential, separate entrance for the residential, the whole.
The building code is a very thick and dense book,
Okay.
and fortunately, the planning board isn't responsible for
Right,
that, the
no, I
building
understand,
inspector
I
is, but
just
yes,
thought, I didn't know
and
where
it
else
does
to ask.
cover that kind of thing, so
It does,
yes.
okay, great, so all of this will be covered in it, okay. I
And just
think,
one other point, I mean, all the sprinklers would be fully sprinkled as well. Just know.
sprinkle, with sprinkle systems, okay. And I think this is the last thing. How many retail offices and retail and office spaces will be in Building 1?
The first floor is roughly 5,500 square feet. Again, we don't have tenants. We've laid out that floor so that there could be kind of 4 office or retail units.
4, and that would be
on
the
On the
max?
5,500 square.
Right.
And that would be the max?
Yeah, typically in these, depending on how the architecture is set up, we ask that they design it so, because they want to design it so they can sell a number of small, commercial units, but we also want it designed so that if somebody could buy 2 of them and knock out the wall in between them and have a larger one, so that
Okay,
when they say maximum of 4, basically means they're saying 4 small ones,
right.
but somebody
Or
could
they
buy.
could be 3 and 1.
So somebody could buy 2 and
Yeah.
and
Okay.
combine them into a larger one if they want
I
more space.
understand, okay, all right, and that wouldn't be known until the project was over?
That won't be known until some business decides to go in there, and then 5 years later, that business may close and it may change.
And go
They may
back to
change
the-
back to, from 3 to 4, because
Okay.
they split up and recombine.
Thank you for your time. And
Oh, you're
again,
welcome.
the traffic thing really bothers me. We've come by there, I go by there all the time. And even the other day, just from the stuff going in and out of the construction place, it was somebody pulling out there, then somebody was pulling out of the middle school, and the police officer or the safety officer who directs traffic out of there, and I only know at certain times of the day, but that person is not hired for this area, they're hired for the, coming out of the schools, so.
Right.
One wouldn't want to think that they're gonna have to have the responsibility of stopping traffic there when school is getting out or coming in, so, thank you for your
And my
time.
understanding is there's that is also one of the sites being looked at with the Mendes School. They may have a second school there.
Really?
So
Oh,
I have not been following it closely.
Yeah, I haven't heard of
But
it.
apparently the 2 options for Mendes are to rebuild at the same site or to use some
Like
of the
the
middle
field
school
in the back?
property, and
I don't
something
know.
like that. And I don't know where the traffic access for that would be.
Yeah,
If the traffic access for that is also the same road out to 135, I would expect that would then result in a traffic light there.
oh.
I'm just
okay.
speculating.
I hear you.
We will find out when that moves
Okay.
forward.
Thank you.
And then, real quick question, if you know, on the entrance, obviously the storage is separate, so you're gonna move the construction entrance to the, past that, right? And you're not gonna use that, because probably, depending on the timing, there could be a lot of people moving stuff in and out of there, so that could cause an issue too, but, so that'll all be finished and done for the storage thing, and then you'll move the gate and all that back, so like trucks can pull off in there and open the gate or whatever?
We've actually done that.
Yeah.
already, because they put up their permanent fencing, now we took the construction fencing down, that's been such a problem, and moved, kept on our side, so phase 2 went down the common driveway, then went back across, and there's a gate there now, so they can go in and out.
Which will help a little bit on the traffic.
One thing that we've been asking for in other residential construction recently, multi-unit construction, is provisions for electric car charging. Not
Yeah.
necessarily saying you need to put in chargers, but more so that if the people who buy, particularly the 8 units in Building 1, want to buy an electric car, they're not told, sorry, you can't charge at home. So that would probably mean putting in the wiring to the parking spaces so that should they choose to install some sort of charger,
Pre-wire it
it's-
for,
yeah, it's only a matter of installing the charger, $1,000, not $10,000.
And I want to thank the town because my car's now plugged in outside, so I
Oh,
understand your
yes,
point.
mine's next to yours.
And mine is not plugged in
nowadays, I mean,
because
it's a pretty
there's
big
two-
thing
yeah.
nowadays, having,
So thanks. Also, there's 2 chargers at the middle school.
Yes,
that are publicly,
but those are often used by the town, and
they're publicly.
every time I go by there, the school department has a couple of cars plugged in or something.
Yeah.
That's also good, it's becoming a kind of a selling point too, to some degree.
I don't wanna see a separation between people who live in apartments who have to have gas cars and people who live in houses who have electric cars. And, right now, it's not that big of a deal, but we're building something that's gonna be around for 50 or 100 years. And that's the direction things are going.
We can certainly put some conduit to then park the
Yes.
field across the
Yeah.
way, and then
Just
as
prep it for,
time develops, you can make adjustments as need to.
Yeah. So,
yeah, a lot of places require a lot of that. California, you have to put in solar, you have to have it solar ready on everything now. Just to have it there.
One of the things I was saying, I forgot, I was gonna bring a letter, as I said, we will follow you early next week, revised plan, so, we agree to continue the hearing and extension beyond that for filing a decision. Again, we should have those plans Monday or Tuesday at the latest. I understand you meet on the 13th, so I would request to see if we can come back for a meeting on the 13th.
okay.
I think that's, at this time, it's appropriate. Obviously, I think the public has spoken, and,
Yeah, I think, there's one other thing. Oh, and as to, the covenant, even though it would be mostly moot at that point, in the event that there is future redevelopment, I would want the covenant filed with the deed as a condition on, the approval.
For this phase, yeah, we gotta work,
Yeah.
we gotta change it around because there's, it's a different owner than everything else, so
Yeah,
maybe we can set up a meeting with Peter and council
Yeah,
between
you'd
now
actually
and the
be
next
better
meeting.
off under the cases, see, these covenants and restrictions are only good for 30 years, but if you essentially
Issue a
enforce-
decision,
if
you've got
you
more
would-
force in the
If you
decision.
would everything that you'd like in the covenant, modernize it, put it in the decision, it's perpetual under
Right.
two more recent cases, so you can accomplish the same thing if there's something that you love about the covenant or something new that you wanna do that'll
Yeah.
go with this project, then put it in the decision. and
well,
that
my,
way
my
it's
thought
better.
is that if something happens in, 15 years from now, these buildings get knocked down and somebody wants to build something completely different, I would like to still have whatever protection
Put that in
we
your
have.
decision.
Okay,
You put everything you would normally do in a covenant, put in the decision, it's on the record.
even if they're going for a
Transfer.
completely new decision?
It can act as a perpetual restriction, that's what the cases say.
Oh,
Yeah.
I did not understand that, so I'm glad you're here.
Emery Bond, 59 West Union Street. So we just talked about potentially continuing this planning board meeting to the 13th. We've attended previous design review board meetings. I don't believe this documentation has presented to the design review. Is this applicable to that? Or I'm just unfamiliar with the special permit, so does it get rolled up into one? Is it a separate
Thank
thing?
you. I was meaning to mention that, bring that up myself. I don't know.
so at this point, some of these buildings, obviously, they've changed a lot dramatically, I would say. So if the board would like, the revised application to go back in front of the design review committee, I think that can be done.
Yeah, especially if, with building one, if you can do something architecturally to bring down the height, design review should also take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Um,
As to building one, my recollection was the design review signed off on it. So if we change the height of the building, I don't necessarily why they have to review that. I think everybody would be in favor of reviewing.
Everybody would be in favor of it, but
The way it looks.
they just might have some
Their next
useful feedback.
Excuse me, Preston, I'm sorry. Their next meeting is gonna be scheduled for February 6th, and so we still have time to get this on the docket.
We
And
can meet
so,
with them at 6th. then
so
that's-
obviously, I think it
then
makes sense to, to send this to the design review committee, and then we can kind of move everything forward, and take it from there.
And as attendees of the design review commission, we were always told that they would make their recommendations and then there'd be a person present at the planning board meeting to present their comments to the board. There's been previous planning board meetings where nobody, to my knowledge, has been in attendance. So, this seems to be the last swing at the apple, and we're getting ready to actually have permitted buildable projects. So, it sounds like that's the next step.
The design review committee acts in Ashland on an advisory basis to the planning board, and we try to avoid making a decision before we have their formal report on the project. And they can do that in writing, they can do that in person, that's up to them. There's no strict requirement that somebody from design review committee show up to our planning board meetings.
Okay,
So
that's just a
though
little,
that
that's
is
just a little
often-
bit differently how the
They
design
often
review
do.
told us, yeah.
It is good if they do, especially if, there have been cases where they said, hey, this is a great plan. We don't really have any recommendations other than it's a great plan. And there have been some where they said, they need to do this and this and this, and usually on those ones, somebody will show up and explain. So,
Sounds good.
So I think at this point, I said, we continue the meeting for the special permit site plan approval for February 13th.
okay. Do we have anything on the February 13th agenda at this time?
No, not to my current knowledge. This is the only open case for the planning board.
Okay.
Excuse me, 433 Chestnut.
Right.
Yeah, the scenic road public hearing, which was requested by the town, and that is gonna be continued, is requested to be continued to the 13th as well. We already had advertised that public hearing for tonight, and then we're gonna continue, then we were asked to continue that as the town works through a land swap with Framingham State College.
So let's put this at 7:30 so that we can put that one at 7:15, and then if something happens, we're not too far out, and we can always do administrative things for 15 minutes if the other one doesn't happen. So is there a motion to continue the public hearing and both the site plan review and the special permit public hearing till Thursday, February 13th at 7:30 p.m.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 4-0.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
I'll get you.
Thank you. Yep.
With,
Thank-
with the bylaw.
Yes, thank you, please.
All right.
Not in it.
I believe I have to read this notice on the
Yes.
public hearing.
Yeah.
So we're now going to do our public hearing on 433 Chestnut Street. In accordance with the provisions of the Ashland Scenic Road Bylaw, the Ashland Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, January 23rd, 2020 at 7:15 p.m. in Ashland Town Hall, 101 Main Street, Ashland, Massachusetts, on the petition of the Town of Ashland for approval of a scenic roads opening application in accordance with Chapter 40, Section 15C of Massachusetts General Laws and Chapter 249, Section 20 of the Ashland Code. The Town of Ashland is applying for a new proposed road opening curb cut along Chestnut Street in the vicinity of the existing structure identified as 433 Chestnut Street. The project will grant ingress and egress for the adjacent parcel. All existing stones from the removed section of wall are proposed to be reused to create a flared entrance on both sides of the driveway. All plans and documentation for this are available in the planning office at Town Hall during regular Town Hall business hours. Any public comments are welcome either in person during the hearing or by email or in writing to the planning office. We have been asked, so the public hearing is now open. We've been asked to continue this till February 13th. Is there a motion to continue?
Can we ask questions about this before we continue?
Sure.
just to understand.
What's
or
going on?
You just wanna continue, it's fine. I'll shut up, we
No,
can do it
no,
next
go
meeting.
ahead, go ahead and tell, what is the property?
So the property is 433 Chestnut Street,
Yep, which is
Uh,
that White House that
which
sits
is the
on
White House on
that the
Chestnut
town
Street.
owns.
The
Yep.
town owns it. The town put a historical restriction
Henry
on
Warren
it.
House.
It's a Henry Warren house. The town is in the process of selling that, right?
Yep.
There's a barn in the back of the house, which is actually, the barn is actually owned by Framingham State College.
Mhm.
And so, the barn used to be attached or be on the same property, obviously, as the,
House. Yep,
there was an A&R approved by this board a few years ago, which created a single house lot, which was kept in ownership by the town. The barn therefore is owned by Framingham State College.
Yep.
They actually store some equipment to maintain, for actually really just maintenance equipment. I believe there's a tractor in the barn. And so therefore, in the process of selling the house, Framingham State College is interested in opening a curb cut through that existing stone wall to build a driveway, a dirt driveway, for access to that barn, which they own. So therefore, the new owner of the Henry Warren house does not have to grant an easement to the Framingham State University. So therefore, there are two entrances, one to the house, one to the barn. It is a historical stone wall. The town is proposing with Framingham State to open up the wall, use the existing stones that actually make up the wall and flare in the sides. So you're keeping that material on the site. So therefore, this has been continued because the Framingham State, the town is kind of going back and forth a little bit with the proposed buyer and Framingham State on where that property line is. And there is going to be at the next meeting an A&R filed, which is going to change that property line. And so therefore, we felt as a town that it made sense to bring this to the planning board as one packet. Not one packet, one package, with the A&R in hand with the scenic road opening permit. So that is the story behind the application to open up the stone wall along a scenic way.
cool, thanks, Peter.
No
Alright.
problem.
So, they're not ready to do this tonight, so, is there a motion to continue this till February 13th, 2020 at 7:15 PM?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 4-0. All right, Upper Charles Trail Grant Support Application Support Letter. The board will discuss and may vote on a letter of support for a Mass Trails grant application to help fund the Upper Charles Trail through the Rail Transit District, the Trolley Brook Trail. 1 year ago, the planning board authorized a letter of support for a similar grant, and we didn't get the grant. We just missed. We were told it was a very good application, and we just didn't quite make the threshold. So we're trying again this year. So I have the letter from last year with just a couple of changes, mostly the dates, but also the grant last year was applying to do engineering from the MBTA road through the Trolley Brook, and then also the on-road portion to Main Street. This one is only doing the Trolley Brook, but it's actual construction funds they're asking for. So it just references downtown instead of Main Street specifically. And so if the
A different amount of money.
I don't think the amount of money is mentioned in the letter, but yeah.
Yeah, on the bottom, oh, that's the date.
Yeah. So I think I've marked in red everything that needs to be changed. If you see something
Chairman.
That's good.
Okay. So, you know.
So this is a letter of support for the grant.
Yeah,
grant,
I think this
the
is-
grant submission, correct?
Right, so the grant submission deadline is the end of this month, and we're asking for something like $100,000 towards the construction of the trail. I believe it's administered by DCR, the state agency that runs the state parks, so. But it's set aside specifically for trails, so different towns are submitting proposals like this, so.
So you're gonna produce the letter and provide that to them for
Yeah,
part of the
I'm
package?
gonna give this, yes, this will go as part of the grant package to show that there's community support for the trail through the town,
Got it.
so. Is there a motion to, submit this support letter?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 4-0, which is good, then I don't have to change unanimous on the letter.
Perfect.
We may have the text of this in
Okay.
the files so that you can just make the changes in red. If you could have that so that I could sign it.
Sure.
They need it next week, obviously. but,
Yeah, no, we have some new town letterhead, so we'll put it on some new town letterhead and we'll doctor it up.
Okay,
No problem.
all right. We have approval not required for 1 East Union Street, 12 to 16 Union Street.
Yeah, so just to jump into this a little bit, at the last previous meeting, member Joe Rubitone and Preston, you were here along with Trish Kendall. There was a discussion on this A&R plan, in a piece of the land, which is, on the A&R is considered recorded land. And so therefore it has to go to land court. We had a fairly large discussion on this. When the plan was brought to land court for recording purposes, there was an issue regarding I think it was a line segment, and or a typo, but it was very small in nature. And so land court, did not accept the plan. Our town engineers have made that change to the plan. And so tonight I asked member Joe Rubitone and Preston to re-sign the for the A&R, which I have over here. And then the other plan has already been filed with the Middlesex Registry of Deeds, and it was accepted by them. And so I'm going to be asking Trish to re-sign the plan as well. But so both plans in the future will always match up with each other. And it was endorsed on January 9th at the last planning board meeting. We've been advised that keeping the signatures the same is the best approach moving forward. So therefore, Dale and Phil, you will not be signing the plan tonight. I'm sorry.
I know you're heartbroken.
Okay, find something
So,
else we can sign.
Yeah.
If we don't need a motion or anything for
Yep.
that, then we can,
You do not need a motion?
we'll wait till we close the meeting
Yep.
to actually sit down and sign.
Yep.
Discussion of planning board fees.
So just to go, to summarize quickly, we have moved on from co-urbanize. The planning board has. The town has not. The town has stayed, co-urbanize is gonna continue to host all, information regarding the downtown redevelopment project, which will hopefully be put out to bid fairly soon. In a more detailed construction timeline will be kind of brought to the town in the future. But with that said, the planning board fees included a co-urbanized fee. So therefore, I think Emma and I are gonna work to look at what surrounding towns have for planning board fees, but also if it makes sense to somehow increase the fees, if appropriate, and or just drop the co-urbanized fee out of the fee package altogether. Additionally, another element to talk about is the public hearing notices. So the public hearing notices now, and prior to my arrival here, the payment was going directly to the applicant. The applicants pay a fairly significant sum of money because they're a private citizen, as a citizen rate, I'm gonna call it. And that totals multiple hundreds of dollars to run a public hearing notice in the Metro West Times newspaper. If the municipality is billed, we get a municipal rate, which is a lot cheaper than what the private citizen pays. So therefore, you know, in talking through this, I just kind of wanted to put it in front of the board. I'm not too sure how far, you know, how much the planning board has dealt with or acknowledges the payment of the public hearing notices. However, in the future and moving forward, I would, you know, I think that it makes sense that we kind of increase the fees to the average amount. Well, if we are talking about fees here and changing the fee structure around, we look at increasing the fees within the board to the planning board, which then could cover the cost of the advertisement in the news, so the town would be billed separately, and so we're theoretically passing on that savings to the applicant. And so it's just one way to think about how to manipulate, how we are.
General fees will be more, but not as much as it would be if you had to pay.
So if we have a general fee of $500, and on average, the applicant has to pay $800 to publish their public hearing notice in the newspaper, they're actually paying $1,300 for a planning board application.
Yeah.
If the planning board
Goes from 500 to 700.
pushes it from 500 to 700, we're actually saving $500. The applicants,
But it covers the newspaper.
but we cover the newspaper fee, right?
Yeah, saves
And then
them.
we
That's a
we
good-
And
manipulate
you
our.
get the muni rate instead of the private.
Correct, and
Yeah.
we manipulate our budget, you know,
That's a good-
into the mailing, into the, you know, the advertising costs. We're actually saving the applicant $500.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a way to, it's just a way to restructure it, and I think it makes sense to, talk about it now, because we're also obviously gonna need to eliminate the co-urbanize off of our fee
Yeah.
schedule.
Well, we should eliminate co-urbanize off the fee schedule.
Yeah.
Integrating that into the fee schedule is a great idea.
Okay.
We will have to revisit that when the Metro West Daily News ceases publication next year, making that up, but I'm predicting, because, you know, that's the way the newspaper business is going.
Find out what the other papers are.
So, you know,
Yeah.
if we end up having to advertise in the Boston Globe because that's the nearest paper, that's gonna be a pain.
Yeah,
We may have to, the state law on this may have to change, I don't know.
I agree 100%. I think every,
Paper you have to publish it.
Hmm?
What's the paper that you have to publish it?
Right now, it's the Metro West Daily News.
It's a newspaper of local publication,
So-
and has to be 2 weeks prior to the date of the hearing.
Why can't it
Can
be
we-
like the Ashland pages though?
It could be in the, that comes out once a month.
Because it's once a month, man.
Why don't we put out a planning board?
I don't think it
times?
qualifies as the,
We'll put out
as
our
a
own
paper of
planning board.
record when it's only once a month.
And there's no Ashland
Ashland Planning Bi-Weekly
news.
Journal.
There
No.
used to be the Ashland tab.
Okay, so there used to be the Ashland tab, you know.
Now defunct.
We do it
Yeah,
in
working on the
Ashland High
South
School,
Shore,
I think.
there was the Cohasset Mariner, which came out every Friday, and there was a Hanover Mariner that came out, and we would put our publication, our notices in that, in
But that
those
was, so
local
those were weekly
newspapers.
papers, right?
It was
So-
a weekly paper, and
yeah.
that
Get you done.
that got it done.
Yeah.
And or you had to, or if it was, or you put it in the Patriot Ledger, which is
Oh.
Quincy's Metro West.
Remember when I talked to the Ashland pages, if
And
there's
so-
hundreds of dollars in like fees to be collected, they like,
Yeah.
up their publication
Well,
schedule.
No, actually, if, we should check if that would qualify.
But-
And if it would qualify and we have one where it meets that schedule, I'd much rather give it to them than Metro West Daily News.
The only thing about the Ashland newspaper is it's only published once a month,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
so and there has to be 2 publications in the newspaper
Once a
of
month's
general
not gonna get
circulation.
it.
Oh, okay.
And so once a month doesn't
No.
get the
It's
job
gotta
done.
be
Yeah.
weekly.
And it has to be a weekly paper to actually make
Yeah.
sense, because if the way the regulations read is the first advertisement has to be no less than 14 days prior to the public hearing,
And
and
as
then
it
there has
is,
to be a second publication as well.
and as it is, like even once a week on a Friday would mess with our meetings because you're gonna have like, well, I can't get it in until next Friday, so
Yeah.
then, like,
And with our meetings on Thursdays, yeah.
It's a
Well, we'll have
challenge.
to deal with that when they close down or whatever.
Yeah, cross that bridge. Every town
yeah.
has to do with it, but
So,
I just want to put that on the planning board as a radar, and that's really about it.
so are you guys gonna
Yeah.
come forward with like a formal
I'm gonna come.
proposal?
Yes.
yeah, but if you as staff and actually dealing with the budget could look at, staff time used in putting documents up on the town website
Mm-hmm.
and getting some sort of sense of value of that, or cost of that, and
Yeah.
wrapping that into the fees,
Mm-hmm.
when we pull out the co-urbanize, we may want to raise some of the other fees to
Yeah.
capture some of that cost of doing things in-house.
And Emma has created links into all projects.
Yeah, I know there was a concern about preserving the data that was on Co-Urbanize, and Co-Urbanize has told us that they'll maintain all of the project pages as static pages, so we can't make any more edits, no one can make comments. But now, on the current pages list on our town website, there's links to all of those projects to those pages, so they still exist and people can still look at them.
And that's forever, or is that just for a year or two?
They didn't put an end date on it, so right now it's forever. Because we asked what is going to happen, what is the date they're going to disappear into the internet,
They said,
and they
no,
said nope, they stay as static pages.
Yeah,
just can't, it's just
As
there.
long as they stay in business,
Yeah.
apparently.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like
Until
when you
they
go
change their
online, the
policy.
first thing down, you look it up
And
and it's a sale
once
from
they
for
shut
5
down,
years
Yeah.
ago, and it's still
that's-
posted.
And we have most of the, not all the digital files that Co-Urbanize
Okay.
has, because the way Co-Urbanize worked is we would get the digital files here. The digital files would be submitted to the town, then the town would actually upload the digital files. And the Co-Urbanize would sometimes retitle the digital files. And so it's there, all concerns have been met, and
Then once we've raised those general fees, we gotta make sure we note, this includes your notification, so they don't feel like we're just jacking fees up. Oh, now it's costing this much, this includes your publication.
I think it's the right thing to do to
Yeah.
pass on that municipal
I
savings
think
rate.
so.
So, okay. I just want to put that on everyone's radar. And then obviously the next meeting, the next two meetings, before we get into the minutes, are scheduled for February 13th and then February 27th. And I do believe that February vacation is going to be the week of the 17th. Is that correct? For
School?
Do you know the school?
President's Day is the 17th, so it's typically you have
Yeah, I
that
think
week
that's correct.
off. Okay,
Yeah, so we're not hitting school vacation.
we are
week,
not hitting school vacation week, just to give
which
everyone
is
the heads up.
Convenient for
Not having very
several
many
of our
snow
board
days
members.
either, so they're
Mhm.
not gonna have to extend the year.
Yeah, so far. Okay, so we have minutes for November 14th and December 12th to look at.
I'll second it.
These ones that we had a lot of comments and changes last time. And right, yeah, that's why. Okay.
The Rupertone News.
Why is this the case in everybody? Like, why is the,
I think it's because when we discussed it last time, that was an issue that we had. So there have been the updates are highlighted from what we discussed 2 weeks ago. I think the applicant's name not stated in the December 12th one that's highlighted is because when we were talking about it last time, somebody said that should be the applicant's name should be listed. But anyway. The only thing I don't see in either of these is the list of referenced documents.
Oh, list of reference documents, I
Yes.
need to add those.
Yes, they both need those.
Can we approve them without that?
Yeah.
Yes, we can approve them with the
Change the
amendment
date.
of the list of appropriate,
Approved documents, yeah.
list of reference documents. I think we can trust
Yes,
staff on that.
Missing something, but on line 57 of the December 12th ones, it says Scott, a member of the project team. Did we not get the whole name, or is that first name or last name?
He's a member of the 12 Pond Street team yet. So I don't have the last name. Makes sense.
We must have just missed it.
Add last name.
I looked previously to see if like he was referenced somewhere, like it was then just a Mr. Scott, but I don't see that name anywhere. It's just like Dr. Evil's son, it's just Scott.
Yeah, some people only have one name.
Is it okay? Is it?
I don't think it's critical. It would be nice to have the first and last name, or at least the last name
Of,
Scott.
Page 2, December minutes, line 57.
It just says
It says
Scott.
Scott.
Oh, I'll get the name of that.
Okay.
That's no sweat. We can add those, but that's a minor edit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I have his business card in my office.
Okay.
So that's an easy correction.
Well, this is business card, it says just Scott as well.
That's then I'm
Well,
I'm
if-
between
if
a
that's
rock
what
and
he's-
a
If that's what he's doing, yeah, then we'll leave it as Scott.
then I'm in a rock and a hard place, Phil.
yeah,
But
you'd be
you
in
know.
trouble if you like, hey. Maybe his last name was Scott. We don't know at this point.
That would make an impression if you had somebody just plain business card that just said Scott on it, nothing
Yeah.
else. I'd be
Like
intrigued.
Pink or some of those people.
I'm making a new business card.
Pete.
Pete the planner.
Yeah, that's too much
That's your
information.
children's show.
Sorry, Bob, you gotta tear this building down.
You don't have a permit. No site plan. All right,
These
is,
dump trucks may be alive, but they're also illegally parked.
if there's nothing else on, can we have a motion to approve the minutes of November 14th with the addition of the reference documents list?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 4-0. For December 12th, is there a motion to approve with the correction of Scott's name and the list of referenced documents?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 4-0. All right, so unless there are, is there any member reports, director report?
No, I say, everything's moving forward. This is our only open case, 81 West Union Street, and then with the Scenic Way. The one item I will mention is that Emmer and I, along with other town staff members, have been approached by a few citizens. One in particular who's on the Sustainability Committee. I am working to put together a tree bylaw couple towns in the Metro West area and then also throughout the state have tree bylaws, which would require a developer to, on their existing plans, identify all trees over a certain caliper and replace trees upon their developed site with a certain amount of trees at a certain caliper and or pay a fee in lieu of to the town tree budget, which would help pay the cost for tree replacement or tree replacement and or the planting of street trees throughout the town of Ashland. In particular, the city of Quincy has a tree bylaw, Lexington has a tree bylaw, Wellesley has a tree bylaw. I believe Wayland has a tree bylaw, the town of Northampton, who has a very good tree bylaw that we're taking a look at. So it's one of those items that have kind of come up through the years throughout the state, and obviously since we're trying to, trees obviously add character and a number of different opportunities and/or positive attributes to a community. So therefore, you want to make sure that you're maintaining trees in your town, tree health. And so this is an opportunity, I think, that the town could kind of look to help protect the trees
And that's
in the
just for
community.
new projects and stuff, or is that?
That would be for new projects.
So homeowners can still go flatten out all the trees in their yard?
Well, it's a good conversation. I think we're having that at that kind of at a small group level. I think it depends on how the town and the planning board, which I'm going to present this item to you, would feel about it. How far does this tree bylaw go in regards to how far does this go in regards to a reach into property rights? Obviously, if someone wants
Let me
to,
just go out there and say that I'm not gonna support anything that restricts a residential person's ability to.
There already is some,
Cut trees on their
resident, right, you
property.
have a certain percentage or something you can clear cut out of.
Yeah,
Only
there-
because it
Like,
affects all the neighbors,
I fully
I
support
understand that.
trees. I fully support trees.
I
I
know.
love the idea of this. I'm glad you guys are doing it, but like,
Right. There's a big
I'll let the
difference.
horse out of the
Right,
barn on
there's a
this.
big difference between what we require
a
from a
development.
developer
Yeah.
I
who's doing a
understand.
site plan
Yeah.
review or a subdivision, and what some individual homeowner can do on their property.
Yeah, right.
The
Yeah.
general theory is that if trees survive when you build a subdivision, very few homeowners are gonna cut down the trees, so you don't worry about having rules about that in most cases.
Yeah.
So, and I'm with you, I don't think we need
No.
rules to tell homeowners that, hey, you
I know, I
can't
was
cut,
just
you can't
asking
cut
if
that
that
tree
was-
down that's stopping you from getting solar panels.
it's a very
I only
good
ask
question.
that because it's come up a
But-
couple of times.
Yeah,
in the
no,
last-
Well,
it's something that we have to talk about as a whole.
And is that even under our, can we even do
you know,
that? for
Yeah, there's nothing to
existing-
trigger,
existing
well, from a town bylaw standpoint, I think that would be,
tree con-
I think that would be more through a general bylaw as
Yeah.
opposed to a planning type bylaw.
So typically, most
But I was
towns
just clearing
adopt
up if
these
this was
as.
just on new developments.
So
and-
we could develop, obviously that could be kind of drafted into the bylaw, is this a bylaw that says, for all new kind of commercial and or industrial development within these districts and new subdivision, definitive subdivisions over, 2 lots,
Well, we already have in our subdivision rules and regulations,
Yeah.
the identifying of the trees. But
Correct.
we don't have anything to do if they are cutting down some of those trees.
Which, like, I wholly support the idea where you're going, and I like it. I can recall that in the past with subdivisions, we've let people out of doing tree inventories and some of that stuff, or they were told to do one and they didn't do one, or they cut trees and they did. So, I just wanna, I'm supportive of this in concept, but what is already on the books subdivision wise around this, and, if it's there already,
Yeah.
do we need
Well,
to?
the difference is, all we have now is identifying the trees. We
Yeah.
don't have, if you're cutting down these
Replacement.
trees, you need to
Yeah.
do
I
replacement,
get it.
which means that if we know they're regrading this section, they're gonna have to cut down all the trees there. Inventorying them is rather moot, so that's why we tend to waive that. But if inventorying them indicates what they have to do in replacing them, that would no longer be moot, so we would stop waiving that.
Yeah.
But in the process of creating a bylaw, if it's part of the subdivision rules and regulations,
The bylaw would,
if it's not part of the subdivision rules and regulations, then we'd probably wanna change that regulation to just reference the bylaw, or
you would
pull it
just
out.
reference the bylaw, obviously, you know, and
Yeah.
in my eyes, it goes right after site alteration, which is a special permit, which is a site alteration special permit, which requires applicants of clearing greater than 500 square feet, and grading, if involving more than 100 cubic yards of earth. Those are the two applicable triggers for the grading special permit. And then you do have a hillside, requirement, which is under the environmental standards section of the zoning bylaw, which depends upon the slope. So if you have a slope, average percentile slope between 10 and 15%, the minimum percent of vegetation you have to remain on site would be, the minimum percentage of land to remain in vegetated state is 25. And then obviously as it goes up, it increases. And so anything above a 30% slope, which is a very steep slope, mind you, is 85%. Obviously, cutting into cutting into a 30% slope is a fairly large deal. And so it kind of goes there. And so a tree bylaw would probably fit right after site alteration special permit, and it would be a tree, bylaw, that would be a special permit,
And while we're talking about that, just really quick to mention, is there anything we need to start like working on for town? Because sometimes it seems like we wait till the last
There's a
second
couple,
and then
there's a
we're in
couple
hurry to
items
get-
that I've kind of looked at, regarding just definitions,
Yeah,
just kind of
any of
clearing
the
up.
stuff we've been talking about that we wanna get on the,
Inclusionary zoning?
yeah,
Well,
that
inclusion-
do we need to start sooner than later? 'Cause I
So
know-
it just, inclusionary zoning, is a hot topic in town. And so one of the items surrounding affordable housing, is the town's affordable housing production plan is, needs to be redone, needs to be updated, not redone, it needs to be updated. Housing production plans are good at the state level once certified for 5 years. The last housing production plan was certified in 2016. Therefore, it's gonna be up next year. And so Emma and myself are applying for a grant through the Regional Planning Agency, MAPC, for technical assistance funds to help update the housing production plan and the creation of a inclusionary zoning bylaw. So I think at this time, it makes sense to hold off on any discussions regarding that and to piggyback the development or the updating of the housing production plan. And at that time, when we are studying affordability, housing production, we also take a look at and draft an inclusionary zoning bylaw, which reflects what's actually needed in the town. And so actually we're applying for that grant funding, as we speak. And so that I can say would cover that item.
All our fee restructuring is just here, right? It's just our own. It
It's
doesn't
just,
go to
yeah, it's just
town or
our,
anything, or-
yeah, it's just our typical fee
Yeah,
restructuring.
okay.
And if we do have to go to town meeting to get a vote, we'll go to town meeting to get a vote. But I think we can kind of talk about the changes that we've
Okay.
made on the board.
That was it. It seemed like the last couple times when we wanted to get something on, it was right at the end and we're trying to squeeze stuff in.
Yeah,
Just
you
wanna
know.
make sure we start way ahead of
One
time.
I
item-
so
know,
that
I
we-
have talked a lot about wanting to do a zoning change for residential, where you have a lot of the pre-existing
Yeah.
small lots, that are go under non-conforming now,
Yeah.
pre-existing non-conforming,
Make them-
and instead have an overlay or some mechanism whereby those homes are now by right, and the rules are a lot clearer as to what they can and can't do. But it keeps the houses smaller on the smaller lots. And so those neighborhoods where they're all small lots will need to stay all small houses.
I think we should talk about that a little bit,
And I don't
maybe not
know-
tonight, but.
Yeah, no, and it's not on the
But you know what I
agenda
mean,
to have a
at
discussion.
some point
but-
before it's all of a sudden right up against town meeting, okay, well, we'll wait till the next one, and then we'll wait till the next one. Some of those things would be nice to get sorted out
Yeah.
and start getting them,
Yeah, I would like to
going.
get that one for a spring town meeting,
yeah, so we should
because we've been talking about that a long
remember
time.
to research and see what
If
the
I don't
best
get it
way.
for spring town meeting, I don't know when I'm gonna get it.
Is
Oh,
this the
we'll-
one
we'll-
about the
we'll
houses?
Yeah,
Okay.
Just lot sizes, the non-conforming,
yeah.
there's a lot of
Whether
little
it's-
areas there's a couple of little areas that have small houses on all the lots, and then it's hard to do anything with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We better get some, if you wanna aim for spring, we better get on the calendar working sessions, or if you're just gonna do it in open, you know, whether it's a working session that, whatever it is, we gotta, that's a heavy lift, so
Yeah.
if we wanna do it, we gotta do
we
it.
might look
Start,
potentially
Now.
for this second meeting in February
Okay.
as a working meeting to
Okay.
go over
'cause I wanna
zoning,
talk about my farm forest thing.
zoning bylaws, rules, fees.
That's an easy one.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Okay,
Putting stuff on.
we can do that.
Maybe hold the meeting downstairs.
Yeah,
Okay. We can do that. Same time?
I
Yeah.
think,
Do you
yeah,
guys typically?
cause I
would
think
meet
if
at the
we're
same
way,
time?
I think if
Okay.
we're way ahead of it, we get a lot of stuff resolved, and at the end, if we're pushing
I
it, we
mean-
can just do the last details, and then,
Once you start backing up dates from the Springtown meeting, we're close, in my opinion, like,
I
stuff's
know,
gotta
we're
be,
already in
yeah,
the zone.
we're
where we
already
need
in the,
to
in the
start.
zone,
Yeah.
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 That's
No,
why
I
I think
agree.
we need to do a couple of these things and just get them on and be done with it.
Okay. Alright, we'll keep it going and we'll put those on the radar.
Two administrative items that follow up with, there was the tree cuts on Cross Street,
Yep.
Scenic Way.
Yep.
We're gonna get them in for a future meeting. You were
So
sort of
I
looking at that,
found
right?
back in 2017, and I'll email that out to you. I'm going through a lot of the paperwork in my. I actually found the other day. I'm cleaning up my office, and I'm finding stuff from. I'll call many moons ago, and actually in 2017 was the last time, and there was a large list, quite a list of trees that were approved for removal.
Yeah.
There was
Were
many.
these on that list?
There were many trees on Cross Street.
Yep.
And so if I can get some addresses,
I mean, I remember that's when we did it with National Grid.
Yeah.
I
And-
was here for that, so.
and
It was
so
Eversource, but yeah.
Thank you.
and so if I can, I'll send that out, and if I can get some areas or could kind of locate where those trees may have been, I can kind of cross reference it with that list.
But just to be clear, that was with the utility. Utility was doing all those trees.
Yep.
So are you trying to think that the utility didn't do these trees and then 3 years later they got done by the town?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not trying to create like a huge research exercise here. I just like DPW cut trees on Cross Street.
Yeah.
It's a scenic way.
Mhm.
Supposed to get our approval before they cut those trees,
Mhm.
right?
Appears they didn't.
Like, if you think that they had that there was an approval to do it from 2017, and that's why you want to research, then that's fine. But like the other side of it is just like, if they cut trees and they didn't come before us for the rules there, let's follow the rule.
Yeah.
Then I think they should come in and tell us why they did
With
that.
that scenic thing with Eversource, weren't they supposed to plant some new trees somewhere?
There were a
Tree
number of,
fund.
Does anyone ever check on that?
well, part of it was they ground down a bunch of the stumps.
Yeah.
And we spent
We-
a lot of the money that they were
Yeah.
going to contribute
Yeah.
towards tree
To do
replacement.
stumps, and then
So
there was gonna be some
some
trees,
of
I
those
don't know.
stumps would have
The
been
follow-up stuff, we
traffic
just gotta
hazard.
make sure we follow up on a lot of this stuff, because
And
we
yeah,
put
and
it
I-
in there and then they just ignore it, and no one ever
Yeah.
says
Yeah,
anything.
the one
Yeah.
stump in particular that's in my neighborhood, I know they did.
Okay.
They did follow up on that, so
I mean,
would like to
if I
donate.
remember, the amount of money that was gonna go back into the tree fund was pretty de minimis, and it was going back to the tree warden, I thought, at DPW. There's a
Just
fund
making sure
that they
that all that
manage
happens.
for planting trees.
Yeah.
I think after we got done with the stump grinds, we were
I
kind
know
of,
you got house cleaning to
Pretty
do, we're
empty.
just piling on, Pete, we're just piling on, you still got a lot
So-
of cleaning your desk out to do, but.
so, and then the other one was the sign at 81 West Union, right, we talked about that?
Yep.
Before last.
So the sign's not done yet. You know, it's, the sign was not approved within phase one. I looked at the approved
Okay.
plans
So then, so the sign was not approved at phase one, so the sign.
by
is
the
there
planning
now,
board.
Right,
The planning board in my eyes, never reviewed the proposed sign.
so that sign doesn't belong
So
there.
it's a
That sign,
bootleg
no,
sign.
that sign has been approved, the sign bylaw, all signs are approved by the building commissioner.
So he went ahead and just
So
approved
he
it.
approved that sign.
He approved that sign, yes.
So, cause we neglected to
Normally,
put a
this,
sign.
What is,
that appears to
happened.
be a gap in our decision. Then, because normally in our site plan decisions, we reference signs and don't let them put in ugly signs like
You
that.
know, maybe,
Like-
could we make like a checklist?
No, I don't wanna talk about a checklist.
I do.
Like this like that sign is tough. That sign is tough, right? Can we deal with, is there a possibility of getting them to do something with that sign? I'm happy to
Yeah,
talk
I know
about a
that.
checklist, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm saying for
I-
future,
I-
moving
like-
on.
Yeah,
We-
and,
we
and what's the point of having all the separate things on that sign when there's only the one business there?
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, there's gonna be all this other stuff.
This other stuff isn't part of that.
I
Yeah.
agree.
This other stuff
They're
wouldn't
gonna
go
have their
on
own
that
sign.
So like,
Yeah.
to me, like, with all due respect to the building commissioner who approved that sign, like,
Mhm.
uh,
I'll go back and double check the site plan for phase one.
I agree with
No,
you.
I don't
We
remember.
generally don't like. Well,
But
we did the sign on the Shell
Yeah.
gas station
Yeah,
when they redid their tanks and they redid that whole site.
Right.
The sign was part of that decision.
Right, the sign is normally part of our site plan decisions.
So, like,
I think we
and
need to
I don't
have a
recall.
checklist.
I wasn't on the board in 16 when that phase one got approved, so I don't recall. I wasn't part of that decision, but like, that sign's.
No, we don't normally have internally lit signs. It is not normally something we allow for businesses like that.
Yeah.
And,
The mobile one down the street would predate, right? The grandfather.
so, some of the gas stations, we have a bit of a different standard, but, you know, for commercial stuff, we usually want either a gooseneck over the top or spots on it.
All I'm driving at is like, there's not, like, that's their parcel, they've got their sign up, they have a 4-box sign, there's one business there. Like,
Yeah.
can we make it better looking, can we make it a one sign thing, can we make it goose-like lighting over a wood sign, can we get them to do that?
Well, why would they put that box there unless they
Yeah.
have plans for it?
I can
They
check
must
into
have
that and
plans
then
for those
I can
other
report back.
boxes.
Yeah,
to the
that,
next
that
meeting.
sign
Maybe
makes
they're
no
doing that.
sense.
Okay, I'll ask for the sign permit, and what was submitted, and then we can kind of go from there.
But I'm back to my checklist, I know,
No,
but,
let's
because it seems like on each one now, we miss a little thing, remember on the
Yes.
81, all of a sudden is there a thing about the detail with it? Oh, because we're so involved with something else, getting something else
Yeah,
right,
no,
that we
you wanna
forget a
put that
couple
in the
little
decision,
details.
you know, like they
But if
come
we had like
back.
a checklist that we went through every time we did this, that
Yep.
make sure you hit all these points and get the sign and make sure the,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, the
I
least
can,
detail of all the things we need to check.
I'll try to
Because
do
it
some.
seems like we get really heavy into a couple of little issues, and then
Yeah.
we approve it, and then it's like, oh, well, we didn't do anything about this or that, or
Yep, no, I can work to try to bring some,
just
Some
to
clarity-
remind us
some
at the
clarity
end
to
before
the-
we make a decision, let's
Sure.
just check and make sure we covered everything.
I can work to try to bring some clarity to that process.
Yeah.
I mean,
And-
between us, we should remember, but, who knows?
No, there's a lot of things to remember during these issues.
Yeah.
So, okay.
The developer for that site one owes the town. Like, they're in a big debt to the town of Ashland.
Mm-hmm.
Like a big debt, like a debt that can't probably be repaid back
Well,
anytime soon.
And they're not probably.
They owe
planning
the
on it.
town of Ashland, right?
Mhm.
Intrinsically, okay?
Morally.
Morally and intrinsically, they
But
owe the town of Ashland.
That's
okay?
our opinion, but it's
That-
probably
that-
not theirs.
That's fine, but that's the reality, right?
Yeah.
Like, So, like, if we can appeal to them,
Yeah.
to their better angels, like,
That's
like,
how-
let's see something here, right?
Okay.
Because, they're in a big debt to the town of Ashland.
Okay. All right.
My opinion.
The,
There's people who'd agree with me in town.
Yeah.
That's it?
and on the, Upper Charles Trail, I meant
Yep.
to bring this up at the same time. Joel, the chair of the
Yes.
committee, asked me, to talk to you about,
Making a map.
maps, because they want, several, maps that they can submit with the, grant application. And if somebody could sit down and work with them on the, getting the trail on some GIS maps that would, work well with the grant application. That was something that I was told last year, that our feedback was that was one of the weaker points of the application.
Okay, I can talk to you offline
Okay.
about that.
Yeah,
Okay,
that'd be really helpful.
okay.
If there's nothing further, it is
36. I
36.
make a motion to adjourn this meeting at 9:36.
Seconded.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?